Ryan Blaney finally breaks through. Kyle Larson had the fastest car, but doesn't get the result he wants. And Toyota oddly struggled at a short track, which is rare. So let's get into it. Coming up next. What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing good today. All right, you knew it was only a matter of time with how good he has run at times in this season, especially the early part of the season before Ford had their hands wrapped around this new body style, this dark horse Mustang. Ryan Blaney had carried Ford in the early part of the season. He had a little bit of a lull, but he finally breaks through today to get the win. He got his 11th of his career, which places him just under Tim Richmond and right above Donnie Allison, Clint Bowyer, and Sterling Marlin, who he just passed on the list. And at 30 years of age, he has a lot of career left, so I expect more wins, and he'll continue to rise further and further up that list. You saw William Byron. Will he catch his brother-in-law? That'll be an interesting thing to keep track of. And he did it in fairly dominating fashion. The third last stage of the race after Kyle Larson fell out, which we'll get to in just a second here. Blaney pretty much dominated that last stage. William Byron had like 4 fresh tires versus 2. Looked like he was going to run him down there toward the end. Made one final push, but did not have enough time to catch him at the end. So yeah, Ryan Blaney basically that last stage, he dominated it. But that being said, it was still a good race. And a lot of people were not predicting it to be a good race because they thought this repave, where they repaved just the corners or sections of the corners, was going to make it a terrible one-groove racetrack. That ended up not being the case because they came back and repaved an extra groove, so there was at least 2 grooves there. That being said, people were fighting for track position all day because there were those only 2 grooves. After the race, Christopher Bell basically came out and said, hopefully by the time we come here next time, they will have paved the entire corners or the whole racetrack. And he was alluding to, if you did that, you would have way more grooves than just the 2. People would have been able to run really high, and people would have been able to run really low instead of just going for those repaved sections of concrete. And I think he had a good point there. But that being said, even with all that, I think it still put on a very good race. One of the best short track races since we've gotten this next-gen car, or whatever you want to call it. In fact, the only short track race I can think of that I would rate better or equal to this one would be Bristol, where they had the tire fall off. And so that's the other thing I wanted to address. The tires were basically perfect today. After about 35 to 40 laps, you had a significant amount of tire fall off. In the close to a second of tire fall off, and that's exactly what you want with this type of race, a short track race. You want to have that tire fall off. You want new tires to mean something. You want comers and goers. So I thought that they did a great job with the tires. I thought the repave of the track was good. Now let's get into the other things, which were a couple of the cautions. One of those cautions we need to talk about is the caution between Kyle Larson and Daniel Suarez. Before I give my opinion on why I think it's just a racing incident, let's hear what those two had to say about it.
Yeah, our car was extremely good, so that's a bummer. I haven't seen a replay yet, but, I guess I could have just not gone to the middle and been more patient, knowing how fast my car was and knowing who I was around. But, yeah, I wanted to get as many cars as I could in the beginning of that little run, and, yeah, just probably ended up biting me.
So you see Kyle Larson there talking about it, saying he was being impatient. He probably should have waited. He knew he had the fastest car. He probably shouldn't have made it 3 wide there because he knew who he was racing against. Now let's see what Daniel Suarez had to say about it.
Yeah, man. Honestly, during the race, I was so confused. Like, I didn't know exactly what happened. I didn't know if I went up or he came down. I just saw the replay for the very first time, and I noticed that the 6, that was the one that was on the outside, he had like a quarter of a car from the wall because he was trying to pinch down the 5, and then the 5 had another quarter of a car to the 6, trying to pinch me down, and I was expecting those 2 guys to be closer to the wall like everyone else. And I mean, I'm the one that made contact with the 5, and I take responsibility for that, but I felt like they were lower than what I was expecting.
So you see that right there. Daniel Suarez said he was expecting them to be higher, but like I was talking about earlier with the repave, with those 2 grooves being the only grooves that had any traction where they repaved them, everybody was fighting over that little bit of real estate. So because of that, he ended up washing up and getting into them. To me, it was just a racing incident. Neither one of those guys seemed like they're super mad about it, so I don't think it's going to go beyond that. But there was a previous caution that put Kyle Larson in that mind state to where he needs to go faster. It put that pressure on him where he was, even though he had the fastest car, he needed to go faster and get all these positions that he could get. And that was a series of cautions set up by this random caution from Daniel Hemrick that nobody understood. Like, we had seen a bunch of cars cut tires down, and NASCAR doesn't throw a caution for it. Then all of a sudden, Daniel Hemrick literally brushes the wall. Like, it wasn't even a wreck or anything. Brushes the wall, and NASCAR, Johnny on the spot, throws the caution. So it was a really weird caution. It shouldn't have been a caution. Pretty much universally, everybody agrees that shouldn't have been a caution. But anyway, that sets up a set of pit stops, and that is where, and then on that restart, Kyle Larson makes contact with Ryan Blaney. He felt like he had a tire going down. He comes and changes the tire. So he's trying to work his way, hustle his way back up through the field for the rest of the race, and that is what put him in that mindset of trying to get that many positions and doing overly aggressive things. But not only that, it hurt a lot of other drivers because that Daniel Hemrick caution caught a lot of other drivers a lap down that were on different pit cycles and things like that. Notably, Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain had about a top 10, top 5 car all day, but that caught him a lap down. He had to fight the rest of the race to get his lap back. Now, he ended up getting a good finish, but yeah, that random caution is very questionable because it shouldn't have been a caution because NASCAR didn't call a caution for any of the rest of them. So even in a race as good as this, where Ryan Blaney wins the race and there was a lot of good racing on the racetrack, there is still some controversy from NASCAR's judgment calls here. That being said, let's take a look at the top 10 and who had a good race and who had a bad race. Ryan Blaney, with the win, of course, has a good race, locks himself into the playoffs. We'll get into the points here in just a minute. William Byron finishes second, continues his strong season. Chase Elliott finishes third. He's going to end up taking over your points lead, spoiler alert. Christopher Bell finishes fourth, the highest finisher of the Toyotas, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. And fifth place there for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Joey Logano in sixth. Josh Berry with a good run. At one point, he was leading this race, finishes seventh. Some contact with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. cost him his track position and took his chances of winning away. Eighth place here for Alex Bowman. Ninth place for Daniel Suarez. And 10th place for Brad Keselowski, who continues to have a great season over there at RFK. Ross Chastain, like I said, recovered to get that 11th place finish. Todd Gilliland finishes 12th. Justin Haley, 13th for Rick Ware Racing. Justin Haley and Rick Ware Racing, he's putting Rick Ware Racing on the map. Rick Ware Racing's improvement this season has been quite dramatic. Now, a 13th shouldn't be anything to holler about, but as Rick Ware Racing has struggled over the history of its race team, these finishes that Justin Haley is putting together here are pretty impressive. Carson Hocevar, 14th, and Martin Truex Jr., 15th. Those were the guys drinking happy beers. Here's the guys drinking sad beers. Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch had a top 10, top 5 car all day. A random suspension part breaks in Kyle Busch's car, and it just ruined his race. Like, I don't know. I didn't see anybody get into the left side of his car all race, so it seems like it's just a random part from NASCAR that broke. And then when they went back on the track, the power steering and water pump belt, I guess, came off or whatever. So just a bad day for him, which should have been a good finish, probably a top 10, ends up being a 35th. Kyle Larson, fastest car, at least in the early stages of this race, ends up 34th with that contact from Daniel Suarez. So it was a bad day to be named Kyle, but it was also a bad day for Toyota. Toyota typically is really, really good at short tracks, especially Denny Hamlin. And Denny Hamlin, since 2021, has led the most laps at short tracks coming into this race. And Denny Hamlin was nowhere to be seen, and neither were the rest of his Toyota teammates. Christopher Bell bails him out there with that fourth place finish or wherever he finished. But man, I was really surprised that Toyota, and I think it's a one-off thing. I don't think it's anything you need to be worried about, but it really did catch me off guard and surprise me that Toyota struggled at a short track, because normally they dominate short tracks. And to see Denny Hamlin at a short track not run well at all was really just, I was like, wow. But when Toyota missed it, they missed it, and it shows because they don't have the numbers that Ford and Chevrolet has. When Joe Gibbs basically misses it, it's really rough for Toyota, because 2311 also missed it, and Legacy really missed it. Like, Legacy missed it really bad. So a strange day for Toyota. Don't expect them to run poorly, but they did today. So with all that going on, we'll take a look at the points. Chase Elliott, your new points leader, as I said earlier. Kyle Larson is 8 points behind him in second. Denny Hamlin, 38 points behind both of them in third. And William Byron, Martin Truex Jr., Tyler Reddick, Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell are your first 8 there, followed by Brad Keselowski, Ross Chastain, Ty Gibbs, Alex Bowman, Chris Buescher, and Bubba Wallace right now would be your last man in. He is 6 points above Joey Logano, who would be the first man out, and Kyle Busch right below him. According to Brad, Doherty is in win or go home mode because he has a significant amount of points behind Chris Buescher, who, if somebody else wins, because Ryan Blaney was the 10th winner this year, somebody else wins, that's probably going to bump Chris Buescher there to the last man out, and you can interchange Bubba Wallace and Joey Logano there. And of course, Austin Cindric and Daniel Suarez would be the two there in 18th and 19th who would bump out the other drivers in points because they do have the win. And one more thing of note there, Josh Berry now 21st in points, leading the Rookie of the Year campaign with his performance today at Iowa. All right, that's about all I got for you on this one. If you made this far, I would love to have your subscription. If not, I'll just keep making these things. If you're already subscribed, you know I appreciate you all as well. If you got a question, comment, leave it down in the comment section. I try to get to as many of them as I can. And if you want to help out the channel, visit the merch store. The link is in the description. And other than that, thanks for your time. Peace.